Okay, let's begin. We're on Samach Test 69a, 4 lines from the top. So yesterday, we had the Gemara said in Rabba's view that a katan can't be a father. It doesn't like not that he's not allowed, but that it's not possible. Ace Abai. So I asked on this. Ish. Torah says ish in the context um, of uh, of sleeping with a slave, with a shifcha necharefes leash. Ainli el ish, that only would imply an adult. Ben tesha sham v'yamecha shorei levi minayin. What about someone who's 9 years in a day? Parenthetically, Sheroy Libya, that the Gemara is stating, or this source is stating that 9 years old is Roy Levia, can accomplish the act of sex. How do you know that that would be included? Talmud Lomar V'ish, the extra above, also includes a child. Um, so the point is parenthetical, but it seems like a 9-year-old is certainly a katan. So, and from here, it seems like a 9-year-old is capable of having sex. Amalei, yeshlo ve'enomoli. Yes, he can have sex, but that doesn't mean he can impregnate a woman. Um, so, in the context of who you can have sex with, then it's appropriate to talk about a 9-year-old boy. But in the context of being a father, that's not possible. Amalei, it's like seeds that produced by grain that hasn't fully grown, hasn't grown beyond a third. They're not. They're sterile. Dvei Tana. A different source for this is from Chizkiah. V'chi yazid ish al re'eu l'hardro barama. Talking about a murder, right? So if an ish plans a murder, um, Ish Mezidu Mazria. So we're taking kind of liberal, we're being kind of taking liberties, I should say, with the word ki yazid, right? What it really means is like from the root, the same root as the word mazid, someone who does on purpose, someone who plans something. But but what we're taking it to mean is ish mezidu mazria, a man who can cook something, and we'll see the source in a minute. You can kind of cook something up and mazria and plant a seed, as it were, literally, meaning you can impregnate someone. Then katan mezidu mazria. That only applies to an ish, an adult, but not a minor. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rashi. Rav Mordechai says Rashi, "My mashallah mezid lishon de b'shulehu." Why do you think that mezid, that yazid here means to cook something, right? To D'chsiv vayazid Yaakov Nazir. The source for that is Yaakov cooked a stew. That was in the case of the Bechara with Esav. He was cooking a stew, and the word is vayazid, the same root. So that indicates that it has to do with that. The word can also have to do with cooking, preparing something. Baha Tan Rabbi Shmuel Bein V'Loav. Now we're going back to the premise about that a minor can't be a father. Tan Rabbi Shmuel teaches Bein V'Loav. A ben Sarer Moreh. He can be a ben Sarer Moreh is someone who can be a ben but not a father. Someone who can be a son but not a father. Um, so so. So who is that? Like, what are we talking about there? If a minor can't be a father, then what does ben v'lo av even mean? Hechidame. So Gemara says, well, what's it talking about? Ile modi aber basar da'ise shtei saras. We're talking. If we want to say we're talking about a woman who got pregnant from a boy who has two pubic hairs, which is the first sign of being age of majority. V'olid mikame delakif zakan, and she gave birth before the pubic hair growing in was complete. Um, so in that case, miiko shows kolehai. It doesn't take 9 months for that process to be complete. V'amar Rabbi Krispedai, because Rabbi Krispedai said, "Kol yamav shel ben saramara eno ella shlosha shel chadashim bilvad." The whole period during which a person can be implicated as a ben saramara is only 3 months. By which he means there's the 3 months beginning with the day that he is declared an adult because he's grown two pubic hairs, and it's only 3 months that um, that that period lasts. Um, Elolav, so it must be Mikame Delaisa Saros. We're talking about before then the conception occurs before if there's like a nine if let's see if the child can be born while the father is still between in the first 3 months of adulthood, then it must be that the conception took place earlier, right? They must have, because the conception, as we know, is 9 months, or as we'll see, 7 months is like the minimum. So that means that the conception must have been before Shtei Saros, before the father became a age of majority. So that proves that this boy who was not yet mature, still a katan, could impregnate a woman. Horse is low, not really. It's not a proof. The Abed Basar de Aise Shtei Saros. It's talking about the conception happened after he became an adult. But only Basar de Akiv Zakan, and the birth was after he had completed this process of puberty. The Kakasha is Rav Krispedai. So you're going to ask about Rav Krispedai that says it's only a 3 month period. Kiasa Rav Nime, Amar Rav Nime answered that by saying, Rav Marava, they say in the West, in Yisrael, Ben Velo Haroy Likros Hoav. A Ben Sarumarer, Umara is a son who can become, a son can become a Ben Sarumarer, but not a boy who can be a father. So when is a boy, can he be considered a father? Once he's been an adult for 3 months. So what Rav Chris Badai is saying is that when he can start, um, that's when he can start being a Ben Saramara. So we misinterpreted Rav Chris Badai, so it's not a problem. Gupa, so let's
He
analyze
wants
that.
to say it's only based on conception here. At the time that the boy, as long as the boy is able to conceive, that's the period in which he can be mitzvah.
No,
And
two
doesn't
separate
matter
statements.
when the baby is born.
It's two separate statements. But what we're saying is Rav Kursabadai is not saying that there's a 3 month period where you can become a Ben Saramara. No, he's saying that you can start becoming a Ben Saramara 3 months after maturity. That's the beginning of the period. So the two cases have nothing to do with each other, right? Rav Kurspadai is not talking about when anybody is conceived. He's talking about the age from which the child can, or the person can become a Ben Sarah or Mara. And so it doesn't have any bearing on our discussion of can a katan conceive or not, or, not conceive, but impregnate someone or not.
Well, then he's not after the 3 month period, he's not considered a ben anymore. Isn't he considered an adult?
No, so we misinterpreted Rav Kurspadai. It's nothing to and is he considered a no, he would have well as this I'm going to state this now, even though the Gemara will discuss if it's correct or not later. But um, you can't you we're not talking about below the age of majority, because then the person is not responsible for his actions, right? So we're talking about after the age of majority. And Rav Kursbadai is saying plus 3 months. That's when you can start being a Ben Saramara. How long can you be a Ben Saramara? That we're not talking about yet. I mean, until what age? We're not talking about that yet. But
No,
in any
but
case, there's no bearing on the discussion of when can a child when can a boy first impregnate someone?
okay, but aren't we saying that he's a ben that if this is after the point of majority, then he's not a ben anymore. He's an I mean, he's an adult. He's not a child anymore. He's
Okay,
an
so the
adult,
Gemara
right?
we'll discuss that a little later. But at this point, what we think is that you're still a son, right? And you have to be over the age of majority. You can still be a Ben Sarah or Mora. Until when is not clear yet.
So he can still be a son.
Yes, correct.
Well, he could be a son until he's 60 years old.
Right. So we'll see.
If his parents are
Are
alive.
still around. So we'll get to
In
that.
fact, he can probably be a son even if his parents aren't alive.
That's true too. Yeah, but then you can't rebel against your parents if your parents aren't there.
Right. Okay. All right. But
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but it's the Gemara will I believe discuss all of these parameters. So we're just at the beginning of the road here. Gufa. So we said, Amar of Chris V'day, Amar of Shamsi. Chris V'day said, Kol Yom Shel Ben Sarah Mara Ein Ela Shlosh Shadachim Bilvad. It's only 3 months. What does that mean? Va'nantnan, but we learn in our Mishnah, Misha Yavi Shtei Saros V'yat Shiach Yitzchakan. You, Rav Chris V'day, want to say that Rav Chris V'day means that the period of liability for being a ben Sora Mora is 3 months after you become an adult. That's when it begins, right? But our Mishnah said Mishev Yavish Saros right away from the beginning of your maturity, because of Al Shiakib Zakan until the pubic hair fills in. So isn't that like doesn't that contradict Rav Krispedai? So our answer is Hikiv Zakan Afal Gav Lo Malu Shlosha Chadashim. No, we're talking about whichever comes first, right? Either it like really it starts from 3 months after your no, that the outer limit is um the I may have misstated before. The outer limit is 3 months after you become an adult, but also if you complete this marker of adulthood of having a full set of pubic hair. If that occurs before 3 months, then that ends the period. But if that doesn't happen, then 3 months is the outer limit. So I misstated before. I'm sorry. So I confused it more than it needs to be. Rav Krishna is not saying it starts at 3 months. It's saying like that is um, the outer limit. But now we're qualifying and saying that it's the whichever occurs first, 3 months or the completion of the of a full set of pubic hair.
So
Um,
you're stating now that that's the that's the latest point at which we can consider him a Ben Sora Morer. Is that what he's saying?
yes. Yes, that's right.
So he's still he's an adult, but he's considered he's
Still
liable for
consider a
Ben
bed.
Sora,
Yes.
liable for a Ben Sora Morer
Yeah.
because he's chayav b'mitzvot, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see later that the Gemara questions whether, like, maybe you can be a Ben Saramara when you're still a minor, right? But right now, we think it's obvious that any punishment is only due to somebody who is has achieved the age of majority.
And this has nothing to do with fathering a
Nothing to do
child and
with yeah.
with
Although we're
fathering a
gonna
child.
right, though we'll get back into that. But right now, it has nothing to do with it. That's right. Yasser from Yaakov min Nahar Pekod, coming to Ravina. Rav Yaakov from Nahar Pekod was sitting before Ravina. V'Yasser v'Kamer made Rav Huna, Breg Rav Shua. He quoted Rav Huna. Shma mina mid Rav Krispedai, I'm Rav Shapsi. What we can derive from Rav Krispedai is the following: Yoledes l'shiva. If a woman has a child after 7 months of gestation, ein ubra nikar l'shlishiyamah. So ordinarily we would say in a full term pregnancy of 9 months, when can you recognize that the woman is pregnant? After 3 months. Okay, but what if it's a 7 month pregnancy? So is it still the case that you can recognize a pregnancy after 3 months, or is it a third of the 7 month period? So he wants to derive from Chris that it's a third of the 7 month period. Um, or wait a minute, no, that's not quite right. No, not a
Oh,
third of the 7 month period, but it would take longer. Um, let's see. Yes, it would be the full 3 months and not a third of 7 months, which is let's two and a third or something like that.
well, at three
How do
months
I figure that?
for this lady at 3 months, it's almost half the pregnancy.
Exactly, right.
So,
But we're saying that since it's I guess the logic is it's a smaller child. It only gestated for 7 months, so maybe it's still maybe the shortness of development sets in after the initial 3 months, right? So up till 3 months, or maybe longer, but certainly up till 3 months, maybe it's a normal development, and you can tell when the woman is pregnant at 3 months, not earlier. And then the child grows more slowly, perhaps. And how do I figure that out from Rav Krusbadai? If you want to say that it's a third of the eventual length of the pregnancy, lamali shlosha. So why do you need 3 months of adulthood for the boy to be called a father? So in other words, like what's the point of Rav Krusbadai? Why is it that after 3 months you're no longer eligible as a ben of maturity. You're no longer eligible because now you are eligible to be a father, right? Like people would know that you're a father. Because after 3 months, you could tell that the woman is pregnant, right?
What
But
does one have to do with the other? You're
well,
just picking 3 month period. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, the woman, whether you recognize whether she's pregnant or not, what does this have to do with a boy
'cause-
age of
good,
maturity?
good, because that is when you can recognize that the person is a father, right? Uh, that he has conceived a child. And that's what makes him a father, right? So it's not the birth of the child that makes him a father. It's the recognition, like he's being called a father because everybody sees that, oh, this woman that he slept with. How they know that is another question. But this woman that he slept with is pregnant. Therefore, we're now calling him a father. Therefore, he's not called a ben anymore, and so he's not eligible or liable to be a ben saromara. I know there's a number of steps here. But
I
that's
mean, we're just
that's what's
picking three
behind Rav Chris.
months as a
Mhm.
definitional point here. I mean, you could say 3 months regarding other things too.
Yeah, but where did he get the 3 months from? So now we're seeing, where did he get the 3 months from? That's when you become known as a father. After 3 months after your because you can't make someone pregnant before the shtei saros, right? Before you're mature. So let's say that on the first day that you were capable of fathering a child, you impregnated a woman, but nobody knows that this happened. Nobody knows that she's pregnant until 3 months later. 3 months later, oh, guess what? Looks like she's pregnant. Looks like you're no longer considered a ben. You're no longer you're now a father. You see? It's a
Yeah,
little.
I mean, they're picking this. They're trying to find a way to define this 3 month period. There are other examples in Torah that we talk about. A person cannot marry uh, a woman until after 3 months after she's divorced, for instance,
Hmm.
because during that period she could become pregnant, right? But we
Right,
don't
and
know
you
if she's
wouldn't know who
pregnant
the
from that
father is.
man. We don't know. So, I mean,
Right.
there are other instances in Torah where there's a 3 month used as a definition. I mean, this doesn't seem to, you just seems somewhat arbitrary to say that you want to
Okay.
say it's this woman with this man that he became,
Yeah, like I said,
that's a
it's like how do you
stretch.
know? Like how does everybody know that he's the one, that made her pregnant? All right, listen, it's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. Um, and I hear what you're saying that, it seems a little tenuous. Um, I agree with you. I don't have an answer to the question. Anyway, but the Gemara seems to take this for granted that the 3 months is because that's when it's recognized. So if that's the case, then it must be the case also for a 7 month pregnancy, 7 month gestation. That is after 3 months that you can um, be considered the father. Amalei, so yeah, wait a second. Shosha, yeah. Amalei, so Ravina answers, Liel Amelach Ubra Nikar Shemel. No, really, you can tell, even with the 7 month gestation, you can tell after a third, meaning after 2 1/3 months. Zeal Basar Ruba, but we go by the majority. Since most pregnancies are 9 months, we go with that as the kind of definition, and we say that 3 months is the 3 months is where most women are recognized to be pregnant, and therefore there's this only a 3 month period during which um, the father the person can be considered still a son and not a father. Okay. Amrua Kame to Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yeshua. They reported this to Rav Huna. Amar he said, Ubedina nefashos miazlina basaruba. Wait a minute, we're talking about Ben Saramara, which is a capital crime, right? So do we go by the Rov, right? Um, The Hatorah Amra v'shaftu ha'eda v'itzilu ha'eda. The Torah says, it uses the word v'itzilu ha'eda, that this is in a different case, in the case of a accidental murder, but v'itzilu ha'eda, that it's the responsibility of the court to try to let the guy off the hook and not execute him. V'ad Amra zilbas aruba. So now you're saying, well, we'll execute him. During the 3 month period and not during the 2 1/3 month period, right? But you should do the opposite, right? You should give every benefit of the doubt. Drua coming to Ravina, so they go back to Ravina and they tell him, "I'm Lahu, Vidina Fashal Solas Lina Basaruba." What? You think we don't go by the Rov and Vidina Fashal? That's the number. We have a Mishnah. Let's say you have two witnesses giving testimony, and one says, "This is what happened. This is what I saw on the second of the month," and the other says, "This is what I saw on the third of the month." So, in other words, they're both giving the same testimony but different dates. Right? Edus and kayamas. No, this works. We disregard the difference in dates. Because they could be talking about the same day. It was a Tuesday, but one didn't know that there was a leap that a leap month had just been declared, and so the previous month was 30 days, and now it's the second of the month, and the other thinks it's the third of the month, but they're talking about the same day. So, in other words, their mistake has nothing to do with the testimony. They're both talking about a Tuesday, and they're both testifying what they saw, which otherwise seems sound. So, the fact that they misidentify the date is not significant. And if you want to say that we don't go by the Rov, Nema Hani Davka Komasade, why don't you say, like, be more strict with them and say, no, they're saying the same thing, but their testimony contradicts each other because one says the second of the month, one says the third. We go by the majority. It's common to make a mistake about what day of the month it is because of the Ibor HaChodesh. So therefore, it shows that you do go by the Rov, right? So we aren't so quick to discount problems with the testimony. Um, so okay, so the Gemara leaves it there. So there's a dispute between Ravina and Ravina about how to interpret this. We also have the this point in the Mishnah about Basar Ruba. We have another Mishnah. A girl who's 3 years in the day, she can be married with bia, with sex, with intercourse, right? As you know, there's three ways to do kiddushin, kesef, shtar, bia. You're eligible. The girl is eligible for this kind of marriage, if you will, through bia once she's 3 years and a day old. And likewise, if she's in a situation of yibum, and the Yavam has Bia with her, then that seals the deal. They're now married. And if someone else, and so now if she's 3 years old and she's married, and someone else sleeps with her, that's a crime of Eishes Ish. Umatama Asbala, and if she's a nida, she causes anyone who sleeps with her, or presumably her husband, to become tameh. Latami mishkaf hatachton ke'elyon. Like the full degree of nida, which is uh, like even the mattress becomes tameh, not just the sheets. Nisei slakoin achalos b'truma, and if she's married to kohen, she can eat truma. And if she's a bas kohen and someone who is not eligible for kahuna sleeps with her, salamina kuna, then she is no longer gets kohen privileges. She can't eat truma anymore. And if she is involved in any case of incest or any forbidden union, allowed, then that's a capital crime, just as if she were just as if she were an adult.
But isn't it the case that if she's married and her husband dies, she divorced, she goes back to her father's house, she can eat truma again? She has no children?
Yes, that probably still applies. Yes, but as long as she is married to someone who's not a. Oh, actually, wait a minute. I'm not sure.
I think that
Um,
is correct. If I remember learning that she can go if she doesn't have children, she can when she goes back to her father's house, she can eat truma.
um, yeah, okay, that could well be the case. But if he dies, then she goes back to her father's house. But while she is still, uh, living or married to a non-Cohen, she can't eat truma.
Right, right.
Okay, and finally, mumasin allow. So anybody who, if someone sleeps with her in a forbidden relationship, that the man is subject to the death penalty. Vihi ptura, but she is not because she's only 3 years old. Um, okay, but the point is, if you sleep with a 3-year-old girl, um, who is married to someone else, then you get the death penalty. But why is that? Ema Islanisu. Maybe she's an Islandese, right? Maybe we don't know yet. It could be that she turns out to be sterile, right? Viadata dahachi lo kadesh, and so her husband, um, will be able to annul the marriage when he finds out when she matures and it turns out that she's sterile. Um, then her husband will say, "Oh, I'm annulling the marriage." So now, how can you put the adulterer to death because maybe the marriage will be annulled later, right? Um,
Yeah,
LL
but it's called at this time though. She's at this time she's married.
right, but the Gemara is proposing, yeah, she's married now, but maybe the marriage will be annulled retroactively. In which case, the adulterer is no longer an adulterer, right? Because it
Yeah.
will turn out that retroactively she wasn't married. But of course, this is a far-fetched case, so that's what the Gemara is saying. A lot of them reading Zilba Saruba. So no, we're not going to say that. That's a very far-fetched case. We'll go by the usual state of things, which is somebody gets married, they stay married, and she's not going to turn out. Like how many people turn out to be an islandist? How many 3-year-olds turn out to be sterile? Not that many, right? So don't tell me we can't adjudicate the case based on the presumption that they are married, that the marriage will remain in place.
But
V'rov
even
Nashim will end.
so, even if she, do we say is that? I mean, is that the halacha that if he were to find that she was I don't know, it's 2, 3, 5 years later, then then the marriage is considered an invalid marriage?
Well, we're going to say we could say that the marriage was always conditional. In other words, we're going to attribute this thinking to the husband, saying that the marriage was always conditional on her not being an Islandese, right? So if she turns out to be an Islandese, the marriage never happened, right? Not that it's not, it's a little bit different than saying we're going to cancel the marriage altogether. No, we're doing it because we're assuming his intention in the first place.
Well,
That
couldn't we make that intention and other things? There's like a strange Gemara somewhere. I don't know. It's in Shabbat or some. If he finds out she has 6 toes or 6 fingers, said, "Well, I didn't really expect that." So he could make a condition for anything. She has two is three
Yeah, but you
years or
could look,
two.
but does she now have 6 toes? No, this is something that will become clear later. So can't tell. The assumption here is you can't tell right now if the girl is an Islandese. It only becomes clear later on, I guess, when she matures.
Well, he may not know that she has 6 toes until after he's married, right? I mean,
Oh, that's on him. He could have checked,
well,
I
I
guess.
okay. Well, he could make a condition. He could say, if I find out that she doesn't have $20 million in the bank, then I'm going to find. I mean, he could make conditions for a lot of things.
Yeah, okay. Um, um, okay, but maybe something as fundamental as being able to have children is assumed to be that fundamental to a marriage, is what I would posit.
Uh, I mean, that people. Let's say
Okay, so you're going to say there are people who get married even,
the
without the
people are
expectation
married
of
that
children.
get married at
Okay.
50, 60 years old. I mean, the
Hmm.
likelihood they're going to have children.
Not likely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I
So
mean, he
okay,
knows
so I'd
that.
say in that case, I would say, yeah, there's no expectation there. But in the case of a man who marries a young woman or girl in this case, the expectation we can assume that the expectation is that he is assuming that they will be able to that she will be able to bear children. I mean, the whole thing is a little bizarre anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so doesn't this show that um, that we go that we don't go that we go by the rove because in so the fact that we say that we do put the adulterer to death shows that we don't consider this remote possibility. We go by the rove, right? That most women don't become an islandess, right? So Gemara says, "Lo, well, actually, we don't execute we don't carry out the capital punishment. My chayv when the Mishnah says that he's chayav." Actually, it's not what it says, as the Gemara will point out in a minute. But when the Mishnah says he's chayiv, it's talking about carbon, talking about that if he did it b'shogeg, then he's chayiv a carbon. But the Gemara says, "Well, the Gemara didn't say you're chayiv. The Mishnah didn't say you're chayiv. The Mishnah says you're put to death, right? So you can't make that reading." So the Gemara answers, "B'va avia." The Mishnah is talking about specifically when a relative, like her father, slept with her. Um, so that's when when the man is put to death. But it's not talking about putting to death the case of Ashes Ish with a minor. And so and if that's the case, we're not talking about it doesn't enter into the whole rove thing, right? It has nothing to do with the being an islandess, being married. The whole thing, the whole death sentence is talking about incest. Um, but Rabbi Miriam says, wait, but the Mishnah says if any of these are rayos, which should include Eishes Ish, right? Then Mumasin 11, you get the death penalty. The Kabbalah Ilave. We're talking about where the man explicitly, where the marriage was explicitly, even if she turns out to be sterile. I'm still marrying her. So in that case, there's no out for the adulterer, right? Because if you specifically say, I'm marrying this girl, even if she turns out to be an Islandese, then she's your wife. There's no way to annul the marriage because for her becoming an Islandese, and therefore we're not. There's no indication about going with the Rav.
So
Okay.
that then he would be a chayav on Eshet Ish.
Yes. And there's no out, right?
Right.
You can't say, yeah, okay.
Whatever chayav means in this case, but he's still considered boel al Eshet Ish.
Yeah. Tanarabana. Hamasolelos bivna katan. A woman is toying with her minor son, meaning that foreplay, like the haraba, and so there's contact, right, but not intercourse. Beis Shammai Omrim, Psalm Minakuna. The this woman, if she was a bas Kohen, she's not. She's already disqualified, even if there was no intercourse. Beis Hillel not sharing, but Beis Hillel says she's still a bas Kohen. Amar B'chi B'rei D'Rabba B'ra Rachmeni
No,
Amar
wait a
B'Shem.
second. Hold on.
Okay,
This is
okay,
her son, right?
her
So what's
son.
to say that she's pasul from a bat Cohen? She's already been married. I mean, she's pasul from marrying a Cohen. She's already married. So if she's married, then
Yeah,
unless she would be an almana,
but now she has slept with someone that makes her puzzle from Kahuna, right?
she, she's already. Oh, so the only case where she could marry a Cohen would be if she becomes a widow.
It could be either. She could be married to a Kohen, or she could be the daughter of a Kohen. But however she's qualified to eat truma, if she's fooling around with her son like this, that's an erva, and she is disqualified.
Oh, so she would have to divorce. Then if she's married
Yeah,
to
if she's
to a
married.
Cohen,
Yeah,
she would have to divorce the Cohen. But she can't marry a
presumably.
Cohen later on unless.
Unclear. Because remember, they haven't completely engaged in intercourse. So it's unclear from this source what her fate would be regarding staying married. But
Right.
this Mishnah is dealing with whether she can still eat truma. Amar Rav Chia Bar Rabba Bar Nachmani Rav Chisda of Amri Lo Amar Rav Chisda Amar Zi, right? Hakol Modim Beven Tesha Shonim V'Yam Echad Shebia So Bia. Everyone agrees that Bia of a 9-year-old and 1 day boy, that counts. Pachos mi ben shmona she'en bia so bia, and that a boy less than 8 years old, bia doesn't count at all. Well, nechaku ela ben shmona. What the dispute is about is a boy who is 8 years old but not yet 9 years old. The Beis Shammai saw, right? Beis Shammai holds Gamrina Midoros Rishonim. Beis Shammai says we can derive from earlier generations, which, as we will see, we can figure out that it happened that children were fathered by 8-year-old boys. Beis Hillel Savrei Lo Gamrina Midoros Rishonim. Beis Hillel says no, not necessarily. Just because it happened before, it no longer happens. It no longer, nature changed, and it no longer happens that an 8-year-old boy can conceive, can impregnate a woman. So what is that all about? What are the Doros Rishonim? What are the earlier examples? Doros Rishonim Mino and Dali. Where do I get that from? That in earlier generations, 8-year-olds could conceive, could impregnate. Sorry. Ilema. So first the Gemara is going to say from Bashava. Miduchsiv halozos Bashava bas Eliam Eishes Uriah Chiti. Bashava was the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah. Uksiv Eliam ben Achitophel Hagiloni, and Eliam, her father, was the son of Achitophel. So Achitophel was Bashava's grandfather. Uksiv Vayishlach biad Nasa Navi Vayikra Shemo Yedidya Bavur Hashem Ahavo, and Nasa Hanavi called Shlomo Yedidya. Uksiv Vayhilish Nasayim Yamim Vayu Gozim L'Avshalom, and then 2 years later, Avshalom was shearing the sheep. Uksiv Avshalom Baruch Vayelech Geshur Vayhisham Shalosh Shanim, and so as a result of that, he had to, he had to flee, and he lived for 3 years in Geshur. Uksiv Vayeshev Avshalom BeYerushalayim Shnasayim Yamim, and then he lived in Yerushalayim for 2 years. Upnei HaMelech Lo Ra, he hadn't seen the king for 2 years. Uksiv Vayhimi Ketzar B'Yim Shana Vayomer Avshalom El HaMelech. After 40 years, Avshalom said to the king, Elchanav Avshalom es nidri asher nadarti l'Hashem b'Chevron. This when he staged his rebellion. He said, "I'm going to go to Hebron and do a sacrifice there." And that's when Achitophel saw that he wasn't being trusted. And he committed suicide. Okay, so if you put all these numbers together, it turns out that Shlomo was 7 years old when Achitophel died. Okay, because 1 second, because 40 years, 1 second. 2 years in Yerushalayim, 3 years in Geshur, and 2 years at home. So that's 8 years. Oh, wait a minute. Is that 8? 1 second.
7.
7 years. 7 years. Uksiv anshe damim mirma liyachatzu yemehem. So how old was Achitophel when he died? So the pasuk says these Doeg and Achitophel were anshe damim umirma. They were bloody and deceitful men. They won't fill out half their days. For Tanya, what is half their days? Kol shnoso shel Doeg in al shloshim v'arba. Doeg lived only 34 years in Shal. Achitophel in al shloshim v'shalosh. Achitophel lived only 33 years. So, Kama Havilahu, how many years did Achitophel live? Tlasin plus 33. Dal Shaved Shlomo. So now, how old was he when Shlomo was born? 7 years less, so that's 26. Paslahu Esrim Meshisa, 26 left. So Achitophel, when Shlomo was born, was 26 years old. And Achitophel was the grandfather of Bathsheba, so the great grandfather of Shlomo. So 26. How much is each generation? There had to be Dal Tarte Shnei L'Tlasi Bure. Don't count the 2 years of the pregnancies in that chain. So Ishtakach Dechol Chad B'Tamnei Olid. So it must be that each conception here was when the father was 8 years old. Because if you have to have 3 generations in 26 years or 24 years, really, then the father had to be at the least you can say is that the fathers were 8 years old at the time that they conceived. Shukmar says, "Mimai, where do you get that from?" Dilma Tarvayu B'Tei Sholi. Maybe maybe it was 9, 9, and 6. Ubasheva Olida Bashis. Basheva conceived when she was 6 years old. Mishum De'it Sabaria. Because you're talking about two generations of men, but one generation of a woman, right? So Bathsheba, maybe she was younger. Maybe women mature earlier than boys, which is that seems to be commonly accepted, right? Because women become age of majority earlier, etc. So don't say 8, 8, and 4. Maybe it's 9, 9, and 6. Tata, and let me prove it to you that women um, mature earlier. The Hahavi law of Valad Meikara. First of all, Bathsheba had a child before the one that died, right? Um, so even if you're going 8, 8, and 8, so Bathsheba certainly could have conceived before, must have conceived before she was 8 because she had a previous child that died before Shlomo. Um, so since we don't know, since it's two men and a woman and a woman in the chain, so we don't know if it was 8, 8, and 8. It could have been 9, 9, and 6. Okay, so that's why that's not a good proof. But we're still looking for a proof that Doros Harishonim, earlier generations, um, could the boys could impregnate women um, before 8 years old, before 9 years old. Elo told us Terach. We're going to prove it from Terach. Terach only is Avram, Nachar, is Haran. Terach had three sons, Avram, Nachar, and Haran. But Avram Galami Nachar Shana. So let's say that Avram was the oldest, older than Nachar by a year. Nachar Galami Haran Shana, and maybe Haran was the third one, so he was 2 years younger than Avram. Nimsa Avram Gadol Shtei Shanim Haran. So Avram is 2 years older than Haran. Avram and Nachar Lem Nashim, and Avram and Nachar took wives. And who was Avram's wife? It was his niece. It was Haran's daughter, Yiscah. Yitzchak, Yiscah Zusar, and Yiscah that's the wife that we're talking about is Sarah. Lamani question about Yiscah, why she called Yiscah? Shesocha Baruch HaKodesh, because she saw things with Ruach HaKodesh. V'hainu d'chsiv kol tomar elecha Sarah shema b'kola. Since Sarah has Ruach HaKodesh, that's why God told Avram, whatever Sarah says, listen to her. Davar Acher, or another reason she could have been called Yiska. Yiska Shakol Sachim Biafia. Not that she looked out with Ruach HaKodesh, but other people looked at her because she was so beautiful. All right, so Avram married Haran's daughter. And how much older than Abraham is? How much older than Sarah is Abraham? Uksi vayipol Avram al panav vayitzlach vayomer belibo. Leaves out the important part here. Halaven mea shana yivaled. How can I give birth at 100? Vim Sarah bas tishim shana teled, and Sarah is 90, right? So how much older than Sarah is Avram? 10 years, right? Kama kashish Avram Sarah Esther Shanin. How much older is Avram than Sarah? 10 years. The kashish me'avua tartin shnin, and Avram is 2 years older than Haran, right? So how old was Haran when he when he conceived Sarah? 8. Ashtakach ki older Haran was Sarah, but Tamni Elida, he was 8 years old. So that's a proof that in earlier generations, an 8-year-old boy could make someone pregnant. So Gemara says, "Mimai, wait, how do you know that Avram was 2 years older than Haran? Dilma Avram Zuta Dachua. Maybe Avram was actually younger than Haran. V'derech Chachmas Kachachashu. Why is he listed first in the genealogy? Avram, Nachar, and Haran, because Avram was the wisest one." And that's why he's listed first, not because he's older. He may actually be younger than Haran, right? So maybe Haran was 12 when he conceived Sarah. And Teda the Kachashu Lukra Der Chachmas. And where do you have another example of genealogy being listed in order not of age but of wisdom?
Don't we see that in Benot Salavchad where they switched it? They listed the 5 daughters. We got in Chachma versus age.
Oh yeah, because they're listed differently in two
Right.
different places. Oh yeah, great point. But the Gemara doesn't use that. That's an excellent point. I didn't think of that. But the Gemara has another proof. Noach was 500 years old when he gave birth to, or he begat Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Shem Gadol Mecham Shana. So if you're going to go with chronological order, then Shem is a year older than Cham. Cham Gadol Yafes Shana, and Cham is a year older than Yafes. Nimsa Shem Gadol Yafes Shem. So Shem is 2 years older than Yafes. 100 years later, Noach was 600 years old when the flood started. Told us Shem ben and when was Shem 100 years old? 2 years after the flood. So Ben Me'ashana of Shem was 100 years old how could he have been 100 years old 2 years after the flood? Barmea v'tartin shnin hava. He was 102 years old. And so what's the problem with that? Uh, yeah, he would have been 102, right? Then he would if he was born 2 years after Noah turned 500, then he would have been 102 2 years after the he would have been 102 at the end. No, he would have been 90. Shame would have been 102 at the end of the Mabul, not 100. So they're not listed in order. So here too we can say the same thing. Amar of Kana, Amrisol Shmata Kami to Rav Zvi Narda. I said this to Rav Zvi. Amarlin, he said, Atun Mehachamas Nisu. Non Mehachamas Nisu. I have another proof. L'shem Yulad Gamhu Avi Kol Bnei Ever Achi Yefas Hagadol. It says that. Achi Yefes Hagadol, you read that as he was the brother of Yefes, who was the oldest. So Yefes was the oldest. That tells you right away. I mean, you don't have to read the pasuk that way. You could be Yefes's big brother. You could read it, but he's reading it as Achi Yefes Hagadol, the brother of Yefes, who was the oldest. So that shows either way. You see that they're not listed in order, in chronological order. Elminah. So. So we still are looking for a proof that Doros Rishonim, you could be 8 years old when you conceived. Betzalel ben Ur ben Chur ben Mati Yehuda. Betzalel was son of Uri, son of Chur. Uksiv Vatamas Azuva Vayikach lo Kalev as Ephras Vatela lo Chur. Well, Kalev, his second wife was Ephras, and she gave birth, excuse me, to Chur. And Betzalel was his grandson, Chur's grandson. So he was Kalev's great grandson. But Betzalel Mishkan Bar Kamahavi. How old was Betzalel when he made the Mishkan? Bar Tleisar, he was 13. Tilsiv, Ish Mi Malachto Shehan Osim refers to the workers on the Mishkan as Ish. So Betzalel must have been at least 13. Tanya, Mishkan. The Mishkan was made in the first year of after the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shnia Hekim Mishkan Shalach Meraglim. In the second year, the Mishkan was put up, and the Meraglim were sent. Uksiv ben Arbaim Shana Nochi B'Shalach Moshe Eved Hashem. And Kalev says, I was 40 years old then when I was sent. So that was the second year after Yetzias Mitzrayim. Kalev was 40. And now I'm 85, so 45 years later. Kamahavil, who how old was he when he was sent as one of the Meraglim Arbain? He was 40. Dal Arbeisar Dahava Betzalel. So how old was Betzalel at that time? He must have been 14, because if he was 13 when the work was being done for the Mishkan, then the next year when the Mishkan was finished and the Meraglim were sent, he was 14, right? So he was born when Kalev was 40 minus 14, which is 26. Upashalu Esrim Mashis, 26 years left, right? So Kalev was 26 years old when Bezalel, who was his great grandson, was born. So again, you go 888. Dal Tarte Shnei de Tlasibu, right? There's 2 years in there to account for the pregnancy. 3 years in there. No, 2 years in there to account for 3 pregnancies. And so you got 24 years left. So each generation, the father was 8 years old. So that's a proof that in Doros Harishonim you could have an 8-year-old impregnating a woman. Okay, last thing in the Mishnah, Ben V'labas, the last thing the Mishnah said, a boy can be a Ben Saramara, but not a girl. Tanya Rav Shimon says, Bedin Hushtei Basri Elios Ben Keben Saramara. It would make sense for a girl to be liable to also be a Ben Saramara or Bas Saramara Shakom Mitsuyin Atzla Bavera, because she if she demonstrates this kind of gluttony in her youth, then how do you think she's going to support herself when she gets older? She's going to become basically a prostitute. Ella, so it would make sense that she should also be subject to the law of Ben Saromara. But the Torah says, it says what it says. So we would have thought that otherwise, but the Torah says Ben, so we go with that. son and not a daughter. And we will pick up here tomorrow.
Now on this comment on this section with the coin and the what we say that the woman is pasul from pasul mitruma, right? If she has she's playing with her son. I have a
Yeah.
commentary here that says it is referring to marrying the coin, and Rashi says mashvi lazona. That would suggest not only truma should be pasul from. I'm sorry that she. It would suggest that it's marriage as well. And I think
Okay.
that would only be relevant in the case of a widow, because with a divorce, she's also she couldn't marry a Cohen. If she would divorce she's married already and she has her son. So it's only become relevant if she would become a widow. Then we would say she's puzzled from marrying a Cohen in the future, right? Unless it's Cohen Gadol, then you can't marry a widow either. But
Okay, perhaps so. Yeah, that makes sense.
And Hillel says no. Hillel disagrees with that. Was the opinion of Shammai. Hillel says no.
Right.
She's not she can marry a Cohen.
Right. Right. Okay. See you tomorrow.